It's time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast. So, today, there's two main things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the amount of time that any music artist waits to release music and how beneficial how annoying that can be for a fan, from a fan perspective of just having to wait like an obscene amount of time. And then the other thing I want to talk about is bands who have amazing lead singers that seem to not use them as much as they could and seem to jump in and sing instead of them when really they should just let the lead singer do their job. So which one do you want to start with first, Peter?
Let's start with the time factor of having to wait so long. And we all have bands that we love and artists we love where you have to wait an obscene amount of time to get another release. And it is annoying. And like you say, Mike, you think, why should I have to wait 5 years to get another song? And also, like, some of the bands, they go on hiatus and they're away for a really long time, 5 years plus, maybe sometimes 10 years. And then they come back, a lot of this happened in the COVID pandemic, they come back at the worst possible time for that band. Yeah. Where they go, right, here we are, we're back for our reunion tour. What do you mean we can't tour? We've been waiting like 10 years for this.
A lot of people chose 2020 as like the reformation sort of like
it felt
brand
like
new decade, like we've got a tour, and then obviously all that got cancelled for obvious reasons.
Bands like Motley Crue come to mind.
Yeah, for me, The Naked and Famous, they just put out an album that was literally starting their tour, and then they had to can the full thing because obviously they couldn't do anything with it being early 2020. So many bands hit that sort of they tripped up on that, and they had no idea that was coming.
No, there's no way to predict that, but it's a thing. I mean, I suppose that's the thing when you wait and you have your grand plan and something trips up your plan, there's nothing worse, I would have thought.
Yeah, and like I say, that's one of those things is those bands could have made those albums at any time, and some of the albums are already made and they're just sat on the shelf waiting to come out. Like, if we think about albums like, say, this Guns N' Roses album that hasn't come out after Chinese Democracy.
I'm pretty sure if they open the vault for Guns N' Roses, they will find plenty of albums.
You know, there's lots of things, but
Prince is a fantastic example. He has full albums just sat in his vault. Some of them, I believe it's Welcome to America.
Yeah.
That was just already made. All the artwork was made. Everything was there, as far as I'm aware. But he was just like, nah, I'm not going to put it out. But it's like, but you toured that. He toured that album. And the album never got released.
Yeah, and there's two sides to this coin, I suppose. There's do you want to keep quality over quantity in your discography and only show fans your best sort of side? Or do you want to release everything you've recorded, like as an artist or a label? Do you want to release everything that artist has recorded and then hope that the fans either find it interesting or that it maybe shows that they're more diverse, you know, like in what they can do instead of doing the same thing over and over again? So
there's two ways that conversation can go, because we all know the person that says, I'd rather them just put the best 8 songs out as like a short album. Yeah. Get rid of the 11 songs padding. Take an album like Notes on a Conditional Form by the 1975. It's got 22 tracks on. People are like, well, they should have just picked the best 10. Well, unfortunately, your best 10 is likely not going to be their best 10, especially with bands like the 1975 that like to experiment. They would have probably picked a lot of the more experimental songs over the more standard 1975 songs that you would be used to hearing, because they're trying to make a statement a lot of the time. So it's probably, by having the 22 tracks, you probably got the songs you wanted, whereas they were likely going to be the songs that were cut. I mean, the amount of times you listen to like B-side albums and extended like the vault track material things where you listen and go, why didn't they put this song out? This song's like one of the best songs on the album. It didn't even make it.
Yeah, and on a contrasting note, Carly Rae Jepsen has a B-sides album to Emotion that I think is better than the vast majority, almost every single song on the B-sides album, which only has a Japanese OBI strip edition, even though you can buy it, it's readily available. Every single song on that album's just one of the best songs
Like
in that era.
project, yeah.
Yeah, and then I can't understand listening to them versus listening to Emotion as a normal album, where the decision-making progress comes in, where half of those songs get shelved and the other half stay on the release. It's very fascinating because, like you say, everybody's got a different opinion with music, and what your favourite songs by an artist is aren't necessarily the songs that they're going to release.
It's apparent with so many bands. I mean, I also think of The Miracle by Queen. There's a lot of songs that are fantastic songs on the Super Deluxe box set that were either released as B-sides or that just didn't make the cut at all.
Yeah, songs like Hijack My Heart.
Yeah.
Great song. There's so many bands that sort of have this dilemma. It's like a moral quandary of, you can't make every album into a double album. You can't constantly release every single song. You have to filter through at a certain point.
Or do you? That is the question.
Well,
do you have to? In the age of streaming, where people are regularly dropping 30 to 45 song albums, take Imagine Dragons' newest album,
Yeah.
Mercury. What is the harm? I mean, I would argue that if you are a big Imagine Dragons fan, or even if you're not a big Imagine Dragons fan, you can look at that 30-song project and say, well, actually, I really like this track, and that track might not come out if they didn't release all 30. I mean, obviously, Act 1 and Act 2 will be split up to some degree. The band will know why there's an Act 1 and Act 2. I would have not thought that Act 1 would have the strongest songs and Act 2 wouldn't. Act 2 would be like the B-sides. I don't think that's the case. I think they've split them
Evenly.
thematically and evenly in order to get their release cycle to make more sense as well. More momentum.
And then you also have this deluxe box set reissue. Here's every single scrap of every studio session. Here's everything culture going around with the Beatles, with Queen, with... I think Pink Floyd do a lot with their live box sets.
Even recently, Nirvana, Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
There's been, a smorgasbord of choice, and they're just the artists that come to mind.
So then the dilemma you have, say, as an artist or a label, is if you try and hide the material from the fans, will the fans seek it out and find it and leak it anyway?
And also, who's to say if you're in a Prince scenario where you're very picky about your vault and what you should put out, if something were to happen to you, it's all going to come out anyway. So why not just own the tracks as they come out?
Or release it on your own terms, I
Yeah,
suppose,
because
instead of having somebody else in a suit come in and say, let's put all this on Spotify, let's monetize this, put it on cassette vinyl, let's make the money from it instead of Prince.
As you say, as soon as he shelved that album, he has lost control of the release product, because somebody else will dig through the vault and they will put that album together, or they will just look and say, well, that's how Prince left it. Let's just give it a quick whatever remix, remaster if it needs it, and put it out. Whereas Prince might have said, well, in my mind, that's not finished yet. That's why it's not out. But we don't know why that is shelved. Unless there is an interview, if anybody wants to tell us, where he says, we don't know why that is shelved and why the album after isn't, for example. There is no real evidence. So to Prince, that album might have been not finished. It might, say like U2, they release a lot of their albums not finished, particularly like in the 90s.
And does that stunt their growth?
I would say not at all. Yeah.
And this comes to the argument where if you have not a subpar, that seems a bit harsh, but if you have an album that maybe you have run out of time to work on,
and it just has to come out,
you've got a tour coming up, you can't carry on working, and they need it for the tour, whatever the scenario is, you have to put this album out, and you're maybe not happy with the last 2 or 3 songs on the album. Is it a bad thing to put it out? I would argue it's a lot worse for your momentum to not put music out. And there's so many bands who have hit this. The Darkness come to mind because they went on hiatus at a point where they was charting. And obviously they've had to grow that audience back.
Almost like as if they're rebuilding from scratch as a new band.
Yeah.
Because the momentum's not there, is it?
Yeah. For me, it's like bands like Extreme, they've released a fantastic album called Six. That the first 4 songs, Rise, obviously everybody was talking about Nunu Betancourt's guitar solo on that song, and the full album's fantastic. The dilemma you have as an Extreme fan is you go, should we have been given that album now, but like fed 2 or 3 albums in between. What was the damage to the band? Obviously, they're busy doing projects. Obviously, they're not contractually obliged to release music every 2 or 3 years. Particularly when they're older bands, they don't need to. If they've got nothing to prove, they've got nothing to prove. So, in a way, we should be thankful we got the album at all. Yes. So there's that side of it as well. And it's a meaty album. There's a lot of songs on that. But from a band as a business perspective, our bands and any musical artist stunting their growth by just waiting far too long. The Killers come to mind.
The Killers, yes, there was a massive gap in their catalogue, and I think they landed on their feet. They somehow carried way more momentum than they should, but to counteract that, another equally big band, Coldplay, they released albums back-to-back on years, did nothing to damage their momentum. If anything else, it catapulted them even further. Like, when you think about Ghost Stories to A Head Full of Dreams, there is not a full album cycle between them. They come out 2014, then 2015.
And this is like what Taylor Swift is currently doing. She's peppering not only Taylor's versions of the original 6 studio albums, but then peppering brand new material in between them all to a massively quick rate. Like, we're talking maybe 6 to 8 months per release, aren't we?
I feel like with Taylor Swift, her sort of volume, her output volume, if you are not a hardcore Taylor Swift fan, you are just not going to be able to keep up. But again, if you are not a hardcore Taylor Swift fan, what sort of argument are you trying to present? Like, this is for her fans, and she has a lot of fans, so why not give them as much music as she can physically release? And I don't think that there's any Taylor Swift fans who are annoyed about having album upon album and all these tracks that have been vaulted and everything and guest collaborations. I don't think that there's really any fans who said, you know what, Taylor Swift is my favourite singer, but I just can't keep up with these releases. No, people are eating it up. And also, yeah, say one of the new Taylor's Versions albums come out and you go, I'm just a bit burnt out on it. You can just check it out later when you're not burnt out.
Yeah, and also what she's proving is even if you release music at a rapid rate, and she's putting like double disc albums out, like we say, maybe 3
yearly
times.
At least, I would say.
Maybe 3 times in 2 years, that sort of time scale.
Yeah.
Obviously, every single one is charting. She's breaking records. She's breaking Billboard sort of album count records constantly. So it shows that it's not a bad thing for her.
It's not damaging her reputation.
Yeah, pun intended.
Taylor's version.
But the other side of that is clearly fans want more over less. Like, if you're using the quantity versus quality sort of argument, or quality versus quantity argument, Taylor Swift is sort of like right on that argument going, well, is she putting more quantity, more quality, or is she putting out a higher quantity of quality than other people?
Here's my breakdown of it. Quality is subjective.
Yeah.
Quantity is not.
Objective.
So that is where this argument sort of comes to die. So you can argue that a band isn't putting enough out, but can you argue a band is putting too much out, or an artist? Because the thing is, quality... your least favourite song is probably going to be somebody else's favourite song. The tracks that people say are overproduced, they might, have the opposite opinion where people are like, well, I like the overproduced track. These ones don't sound finished. Like, well, I like these because they sound authentic. And that's where this full thing crosses over. So quality is not something that the artist can really predict. You can put your best songs out there, but again, people like fragility in music, people like underproduction, hence the full grunge thing. So arguably, if you don't release the fragile, underproduced, underworked on songs, you might actually be releasing less quality and more manufactured music, according to music or musicologists.
It's a really tough thing with production because you're always sort of walking the tightrope of underproduced and overproduced, and you lose fans. Like, the Venn diagram is like, you would say that maybe 50% of people don't mind.
Yeah.
But you'll have, say if you use something like autotune, or if you record in like a super high-end studio
Or you
with
do
big,
the thing-
big producers.
I was going to say where you get a new producer in and all your old fans go, I don't like it, the new producer changed them. An argument is the band had changed. That's why they hired this producer. That's normally the argument.
Yeah, so obviously when it comes to direction, you can release a very fragile, open-hearted acoustic album and lose your pop or rock or dance fans. Like, say, if you're a dance artist and you're like, this is all acoustic, people who want the bangers and
They're
the
not gonna
drops,
show up.
they're going to go, well, it's all acoustic, innit? And, that sort of feeds into this argument. And then, like, from a release point of view, do you give everybody something? And how do you go about doing that? Do you release 3 albums in different styles? Do you release an album with a hodgepodge of different styles within it?
This is a criticism I feel like the 1975 get is they're not a great band to put on shuffle because they do whatever. And so you might shuffle and get a ton of acoustic, sort of really authentic and mellow songs in a row, or you might shuffle it and get all of the like pseudo 80s pop bangers in a row that people seem to love from them.
And the other thing is, say, that, like with Being Funny in a Foreign Language, you sort of lack that experimental, instrumental side to that album, and it's shorter. So you could argue that maybe the experimental side of it was there,
and they just took it away,
just took it out
to make a more powerful release, in inverted commas powerful, because them songs probably would have just been there anyway, but everybody keeps moaning at them for experimenting, so why should they give you more? Because that's the full thing. The CDs, they can take, and streaming, you have no cap, you have no Red Book standard, so there's no issue with them. Like, they could put out 100-song albums. People regularly do release 100-song compilations and bootlegs.
For example, Richie Kotzen released, I think it was 50 songs for his 50th birthday, and that's a massive album and a massive undertaking to record, but still, no, there's no qualm that you can listen to that. You can pick your favourite songs.
Yeah, you could just pick your...
make your favourite 15-song album out of the 50. Or you can like every single song, like I'm sure a lot of his fans do. I've listened to a lot of the songs are great. Now, the argument you have in that scenario is, if he reduced that album to the best 12 songs, would he pick the ones you like the most?
It's a great question.
So, yeah, it sort of feeds back into this. And then you have bands who release high volumes of music, and by high volumes I mean they have consistently released 2 to 4 albums a decade. I'd say that's pretty consistent. I think it's a high volume. That's
like what you would hope or expect. That's sort of like the tried and tested, an album every 2 or 3 years, like you say. It covers your bases, and it's not too frequent, not too little.
Yeah, you have bands like Journey, for example, and a lot of these sort of, like, when they span multiple decades, some of the bands struggle to keep the same lineup, right?
Yes.
And some of the bands, it might be the singer's band, it might be the guitarist band, it might even be the drummer's band, like, say, Fleetwood Mac. It all depends on the band. So this is where we get into bands who have amazing lead singers, right? But for some reason, the band decide to not use them on any given song or multiple songs, or they might fire them before an album and just, not use them for a full album.
Yeah.
So there's a few examples. Like, I'm going to start with Journey. Journey have had a lot of amazing lead singers. Now, I mean, like, the top quality singers like Steve Perry and that. They've had Steve Augury. They've had Arnell. I'm not even going to try. I don't know.
Without looking at it on the screen, yeah. But Arnell, the current singer of Journey, is fantastic as well.
Yeah. And it always surprises me how often you will listen to an album and go, well, that's not, say, Steve Augury singing. That's the bass player. That's the keyboard player. That's the guitar player. And it's like, why have a powerhouse lead vocalist in any given recording situation when you're not going to use them? Like, we have Steve Lukather, like, quoted on one of the deluxe box sets in one of the DVDs saying that, if you're a band, you need the best lead singer you have. And obviously he's boasting about how good the lead singers are.
Yeah, he's bigging up
Joseph Williams.
Saying, look, we're back. We've got Joseph Williams. He's amazing, which he is, fantastic vocalist, and he suits Toto really well.
But then on All the Little Things, you have Steve Porcaro singing. On Chinatown, you have
David Page
singing. Steve Lukather sings 21st Century Blues.
Yeah.
So it becomes one of those things
where you're bigging up your vocalist. You're saying this vocalist, we wouldn't be even going if we didn't have this vocalist. And then you listen to the album and go, well, hang on, the vocalist isn't singing on three to five of the tracks. And even when it is a song where he's singing, you've got situations where one of them takes the verse. And like, yeah, so you worry about the chorus. I mean, Africa by Toto is one of the most bizarre songs because people are just like, yeah, you know, the singer of Toto. It's like, well, the singer of Toto doesn't really come into the chorus on Africa.
Yes.
It's all David Page, the piano player.
Yeah. And it's just things that a lot of people don't think about, but it's things that a lot of, say, band members will always talk about how you need to have the best lead singer available. You need the chops, the skills, the pipes, however they want to call it. And then you'll have like an album, like say, even a perfectionism-minded band like Boston, right?
Yes.
Say Corporate America, right? You have an album where they've spent a decade recording this album. They've more singers in that band than they can throw, than they can shake a stick at, right? So you look at some of these lineups, say on the song Corporate America, you have Brad Delp, you have Cosmo, what's his name?
Frank Cosmo.
Kimberly. You have all them all singing, and then it pans in the music video, and Tom Scholz is singing as well.
And he sings literally every line in that song.
Yeah, they're all singing. There's like a stack of harmonies, and obviously they're doing like a harmonizing thing, but it's like one of those things where...
But in that song, they are all mixed at unity. There is no lead vocal in that song.
Yeah.
They have taken... And it doesn't sound like Queen, where Queen, you do the harmonies, you mix them at unity, whatever. That's not how this sounds. They're all singing at different points, and it's all to do with like the Guns N' Roses, the octave under thing.
Yeah.
So it's like... There's perpetually like two lead vocalists.
Yeah, but obviously there's a song on the album after Corporate America where Tom Scholz just does the lead vocal for the entire song, despite the fact that he has just hired, well, not just hired, but Tommy DiCarlo is there.
Yeah,
you've got
specifically to do the vocal.
Yeah, and then it's just such a weird thing because they're hiring vocalists and then they're like, I've got this one.
Yeah,
and
I've got this.
It's so bizarre because it's not a bad thing. It gives the records more range, and a lot of people, some people, probably won't even notice.
Yeah.
Unless they look at the album sleeves or the credits.
Especially when they're sound-alikes, and this is the thing with Journey. Like on the new Journey album, Freedom, I was looking through the book. I didn't even realise that Arnell doesn't sing one of the songs. I believe it's Afterglow. I'd have to check. But Dean Castronova sings it. And he does backing vocals, but he has been the drummer for Journey quite a lot of times, and he sang lead vocals on certain songs. But it's like, where does that come into it? He's not even technically in the band for that album, yet he sings lead vocals on one of the songs. And it's like, well, they're sound alike, so Arnell could have just sung that, theoretically.
Yeah, he's there. Why not just let him sing? So it is a bizarre thing that you notice with a lot of these bands. Another band that's not in the sound-alike territory is Queen.
Yes.
And obviously, with Queen, all that people talk about is how good Freddie Mercury is.
You would think when Freddie Mercury is in the band and all everybody bangs on about is how good Freddie Mercury is. Once in a generation vocalist situation. Yeah. And I agree, Freddie Mercury is one of the best vocalists of all time. Yet there is a good chunk, I'd have to actually look at the number, but there's a fair few songs where Freddie Mercury isn't doing the lead vocals or he's not really singing anything but backing harmonies at all. And there are also plenty of sections in Queen songs where the band members are like, you know, I've got this section. I know that this is, you know, we're just going, but Brian's going to take this verse.
Yeah, songs like I'm in Love with My Car has Roger Taylor singing. 39 has Brian May singing.
Another great example, Who Wants to Live Forever? Brian May sings all the intro.
Yes, and that, like, if you're talking about somebody who's never heard of Queen and that's the first song they hear, the first thing they hear is Brian singing, that is their first impression of the vocals in Queen. They might turn it off at that point, they might switch the radio station, they don't know Freddie's coming in 30 seconds, do you know what I mean?
As the years sort of progressing Queen, particularly when they're on their final two studio albums where they're sort of in a mad dash for time, you hear that a lot more, that is expected. But it's not something that was new in Queen. Like, obviously, they all do the harmonies in unison together, and that is a lot of Queen's catalogue as well.
Yes.
But to take the lead vocal duties is just fascinating, I think. Well, you've got a powerhouse like Freddie Mercury, and I really like a lot of the songs.
I mean, obviously, we're talking about some of our favourite bands here, but it's just something that...
It's a bizarre situation.
Yeah, that we've noticed listening to some of the bands, and like you said, they will hire a singer to be the lead frontman, like even in a lesser known band that we've discovered recently, like The Storm. Greg Rowley has put together this absolute powerhouse 5-piece. I think it's a 5-piece. He's got, I'm not going to remember his name now. Google his name for me. But yeah, so he's hired a really, really impressive singer. And Greg Rowley's writing the bands. He's sort of like the lead songwriter. He spearheaded Journey. He found Steve Perry to replace him in Journey.
And the keyboard player in Journey, Jonathan Cain, he was his apprentice, essentially.
He was basically hiring proteges and training them to replace him in Journey, which is bizarre in itself. But Greg Rowley basically gets singers in, even with, say, Feeling That Way by Journey, gets Steve Perry in, does like a dual vocal to integrate him into the band, which actually is very smart.
It's a great sounding song as well.
Yeah, because obviously you get the counterpoint of two vocalists, but you're also introducing a new frontman with the current frontman of the band. Right, so it's Kevin Shavlant, I'm going to say. Shalfant.
I'm going to need a pronouncer on that one, but Shalfant.
Yeah, he's an incredible singer. And yet Greg Rowley is like on
for those who don't know as well, sorry, Kevin Shalfan is from a band called 707 as well, which he was briefly, and he did an album with them. That's before he went into The Storm.
Yeah, so you have Greg Rowley, and he's like, I'm going to sing half the tracks, basically, or I'm going to sing lead on, like, dual vocals.
They recreate that sort of early Journey's sound when Steve Perry had just joined. That's what The Storm's sort of doing. There's an appeal to that. There's appeal to having multiple singers. I mean,
particularly in different vocal ranges.
Yeah,
as well.
But on another completely different tangent, Frankie and the Valleys, Oh What a Night.
Yeah.
That one, everybody takes a verse. Everybody takes a section of the song. And it's weird because I feel like sometimes if you watch the music video, you're like, oh yeah, it's obvious that all the sections are sung by different people. If you're not, if you're just sat passively listening to a song, sometimes you don't really realise that that's happening.
Yeah, and it's a bit like with the girl and boy bands. You can listen to a song and not even register how many people are singing what lines, because sometimes particularly if you're unaware of who's in the band, you're just going to listen to it and go, great. And you might look and they're alternating every other line.
Yes.
And you're just completely blissfully unaware of who's singing what.
You're just listening to the song.
You're just listening to the song, because sometimes it's really difficult to notice. And once again, unless you're really paying attention when you're listening to music and you know, like, say, who's in the band, what their individual voices sound like, you're not going to know who's singing which part of what song. But it is an interesting thing, particularly with obviously in situations like Little Mix or Girls Aloud, they're all singers, they're all there to sing.
Yes.
The bizarre thing with the classic rock bands is you'll just have the bass player
who's like, yo, I'm going to take this one.
I'm taking this one. This is my song. I've wrote it. I'm going to sing it.
Kiss come to mind for that, yes.
Yeah, and it's so bizarre because obviously they're more like not fighting for power in the band, but they're basically like they want to get their moment in the spotlight by singing a song, or they want to.
They're so attached to this song they've written that they're like, you know what? I don't think the other members in the band can maybe carry the song the way I want to carry it because they're so invested in it. So they just take it. But that's great. I believe the song's Beth by Kiss, but that ended up being like the biggest hit on that album, I believe.
Well, it was four different albums that all was released at the same time, wasn't it?
But that was like
that before
big, it was a big, I believe that one was a big hit. And so it sort of drove a rift in the band because then Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, who normally take the vocal duties and the songwriting, are like, well,
that should have been my hit.
Yeah, it should have been me.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting sort of view of band politics as well in this situation. Like the Eagles, for example.
Yes.
They hired the newest bass player for the Eagles, who's been in for ages. He's been in since like
we
the
say
80s.
Newest, but it's a long time.
He was just told the bassist sings this song, so you've joined the band, you're playing bass, you sing this song.
But everybody in the Eagles, is a singer.
Yeah.
Aren't they? They all take their songs.
Anybody could have just took that live,
To join a band and say, well, I don't sing, I'm here to play bass, and to be told by like four singers, who are a lot of them legendary singers at that.
Yeah.
Well, you sort of just got to figure it out. You've got to sing this one because none of us are going to sing it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you could just take it off the set and like, no.
No, well, that's it.
We're
Yeah.
not going to take it off the set.
Make him sing it live. That's the bizarre thing. Like you say, they could remove the song from the set. They could get one of the backing singers, because a lot of the time they have 3 backing singers. They're like, nope, bassist sings this song. Yeah. Obviously, in the Eagles, you would hope you would be able to sing because they're going to be harmonising all the time. But there's a big difference for a lot of people between stacking in, getting into that harmony, and then saying, you're the lead singer, you carry the track.
Also, he didn't write that song. He didn't originally sing it. So that is a completely different situation. There's one thing to say, well, I wrote this song and I sung it like this and it was all natural and personal to me, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to sing it live because I know how to do it. You're just being told, so you sing this guy's song. And I believe it's a really hard song. Like it goes right to the top of his range and stuff.
Yeah, they do talk about it on the Eagles documentary.
Yes.
Is it When Hell Freezes Over? That's one of the albums. I don't know if the documentary's called that, but it is on Netflix.
The big
Eagles
documentary. They go into it, and it's really funny, to be honest, because there's a lot of humour from him in, like, he joins the band and he's like, why do I have to sing this song? You know, I'm not here to do that. It's just they're told, well, you know, just do it, and it's funny, to be honest, because you've got Don Henley, like the golden voice. Yeah. Everybody in that band sings. Joe Walsh has a solo career, and you're just like
Glenn Fry.
Yeah, to be told, no, you've got to sing it. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, it's like putting you. Just any sort of musician in a room full of like massive, because they're all individual sort of singers as well, like with individual hits. So you're being told by 4 massive singers who are all in the Eagles, but also all have big hits at this point solo.
Yeah, solo.
Oh no, we're not going to sing it. You sing it, and I do think it's fascinating.
It feeds into the Chad Kroeger from Nickelback, his thing of saying, well, in a room full of guitar players, he's a singer, and in a room full of singers, he's a guitar player, because he's sort of half of each, and he is not going to go into a room of singers and say, yeah, I'm X Factor and I'm the vocalist, like I'm going to hit the high note, blah blah blah, and same in a room of guitar players. He's not going to be like, well, yeah, I can play Eruption in one go, blah blah blah. Even though I would argue he's phenomenal at both.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that's where this mentality comes in, because a lot of these situations are bands where they're like, well, you know, I may be the lead vocalist, but I only joined to play drums. It just happens that he had ended up, say, like Don Henley, happens that he practiced and he has an incredible voice, and the way, like,
it's a bit like Phil Collins and Genesis with Peter Gabriel. Phil Collins is just a drummer for Genesis, and he does backing vocals. Peter Gabriel leaves Genesis, and the band audition a bunch of lead vocalists. Nobody can cut it, because obviously Phil Collins is the one having to teach them the vocals, and the band look at Phil and they go, well, you might as well just sing then. He's like, well, I'm just here to play drums, and then obviously that propels him into the front seat, really, of Genesis, the face of Genesis, and then he has a massive solo career. Basically, mainly singing. He does play the drums, but mainly for a lot of people,
they think of him as a singer
for his singing, because obviously a lot of people pay no mind to the drums. And what's really bizarre with Genesis is how a 70s prog rock band can propel themselves into an 80s pop band, but then also Peter Gabriel comes back and is one of the biggest pop icons, like pop rock icons or whatever, of the 80s with his album Sir. And you're thinking, but these are prog guys. These are prog guys. Why are they all doing like 80s pop so well? And they're some of like the pinnacle of that 80s pop rock sort of blend, and like world music and all sorts. Because they're with them being proggy, they're experimenting.
But maybe that's why they did so well, because they pushed the boundaries in unconventional ways.
Yeah. So it's all about really just being creative. I think that's the main thing. There's no right or wrong to do in these situations. And I think some bands may hedge all the bets on the lead singer, but maybe more beneficial to branch out and be more creative.
And a lot, you think of the Beatles, obvious one, Queen. I mean, there's a lot of examples of bands. I mean, even to Status Quo, 2 sort of lead vocal figures in Status Quo. Yeah. And this dual vocal thing, you know, there are new bands doing it.
ZZ Top just comes to mind.
ZZ Top,
because Dusty Hill sings Tush, which is one of the biggest hits. He sings Viva Las Vegas.
He sings a lot. He sings like a good chunk of the songs.
You know, a lot of people won't notice because they'll just see one of the two beard guys singing and they won't register who it is a lot of the time. But like you say, that's another example where, I mean, I suppose a lot of these are sort of, all the band members are playing instruments a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So they will sing. It's more bizarre when you've got, say, I mean, like I say, I suppose most singers, like even Freddie, I was about to say Freddie Mercury, he's like, well, he plays the piano.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a weird one, isn't it?
I was just about to say, the dual vocalist thing, I feel like it's maybe not as popular, but there are new bands doing it. One of the newest bands I've heard doing it, Hot Milk.
Yes.
They've got this two vocalists taking different verses all the time situation. And I suppose it's something to think about, like, is that a benefit? I mean, I would argue it's a benefit because you have two different types of tone. You have obviously it saves the voices. This is why people did it originally. Is it saved the voices when they're doing these long set lists? They're like, well, I can sing 4 songs at full power, then you can sing 4 songs at full power.
You could say that maybe the K-pop stuff is really putting this narrative to its most extreme, where it's like you get a line here, a line there, a rap here, or whatever, and they're really utilising resting vocals and singing.
Yeah.
But also splitting that role in music between, like in some cases, a lot of people, more than 10. Most commonly, like 5 to 10 is sort of the amount of singers they have in a lot of the K-pop acts, but it's some of them really bend it to the extremes. But obviously, the other factor is, like, from a marketing point of view, they have more front men or front women to market at their audience. And, like, when you've got, say, Status Quo, you think of 2 people.
Yeah.
Blink
182. Just thought of them.
Dual vocalists. And it's a good way to sort of make more members of a project feel more relevant instead of putting the entire spotlight solely on one person in the band's shoulders. They can sort of say, well, everybody in this band is equal. And that's sort of what they do with a lot of this sort of stuff, where everybody takes different vocal duties and different sort of parts of the music, and it makes it more of a cohesive band. Maybe that's why a lot of the examples we're talking about are very popular, because as a band, they stick out because they have more than one vocalist.
And to a lesser degree, bands like U2, where the Edge takes a lot of the counter vocals, because counter vocals are a very difficult thing to do as a single person. A lot of the time they overlap. But it also propels the Edge forward in the arrangement. You think of Bono and the Edge as not so much as a duo, because U2 is a band, but they are somewhat of a pair when it comes to the way that they deliver the songs.
Yeah, a little bit like David Lee Roth and Michael Anthony. His backing vocals always gave an extra angle to David Lee Roth's strength. Yeah, particularly like on chorus building and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been our thoughts on these two subjects.
What bands do you think we've missed out that utilise multiple vocalists?
Yeah,
and it could be any genre.
We've definitely not covered all of them. We've maybe covered a very small percentage of them. And also, do you think that bands should release music more frequently or less frequently? What's your opinion on quality over quantity, and does it matter?
And is there such a thing?
Is there such a thing? I would argue there isn't such a thing, because that is like the main argument, isn't it? Is that, well, they've got 5 good albums and then they called it a day. It's like, well, they could have had 10 good albums and
if
called
they
it
just
a day.
smashed
if
them,
they just carried on going, you know. But I'm Mark,
and I'm Peter.
Thanks for listening, and we'll you can hear us next week.
Yeah.